Let me introduce some members of town government that assist this board. To my left is Martin Simon, Assistant Town Attorney. To his left is Blaise Donadio, a planner in the Planning Department. We are all here tonight seeking relief from the Smithtown zoning ordinances, and it's our job to try to help you achieve the relief you are requesting whenever possible. It's up to you to provide this board with precise and accurate information so we can make a decision based on the facts presented. This board must consider the 5 area variance considerations in order to render a decision, and they are as follows. They're also listed up here for you. Number 1, whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the variance. Number 2, whether the benefit sought by the applicant can be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the area variance. Number 3, whether the requested area variance is substantial. Number 4, whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district. And number 5, whether the alleged difficulty was self-created. Procedures for tonight's meeting. Cases will be called in the order they are advertised. When you are called, please present your certificates of postings and mailings to Mr. Donadio if you haven't done so already. Then you'll be asked to go to the podium, and you'll state your name and address for the record, and then proceed to tell us why you need your variance. At the end of your presentation, if anyone in the audience would like to speak on your case, they will be given one opportunity to do so. Then the applicant can come back to the podium to answer their concerns. Once the public hearing is closed, no further information will be accepted concerning the case. There are 2 ways to find out about your case. You can call the planning office tomorrow after 12 p.m., or you can wait and be notified by mail. No adjournment, so.
Adjournments,
go right
okay.
ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first case on the agenda, case number 18985, Primark US Corp. The location of the property is in the Smith Haven Mall, the northeast corner of Middle Country Road and Alexander Avenue. The property is owned SCB. The applicant is requesting a variance to increase the maximum height of a wall sign from 15 feet to 30 feet, 24 feet existing, for a proposed 91 square foot illuminated wall sign.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Carmen Nelly. I'm an Ultimate Sign Design to represent Primark this evening. My address is 86 Sewell Street, Hempstead, New York, 11550.
Okay. And you submitted all the necessary paperwork. Okay, thank you.
Primark is looking for a relief from code to install a sign 30 feet above grade, whereas normally 18 is permitted. Previous tenant, J.C. Penney, was already approved in excess of up to 24 feet above grade. Due to the reconstruction of the area where Primark is taken over, the facade has changed, so we are not able to use the 24 height above grade previously approved for J.C. Penney. So we're looking to get approval to make it just above the window area in the side, on the second floor window area. This is in keeping with the other signs. There are several other signs in that Smith Haven Mall that also are higher above grade than the permitted code. And it will be in the same level plane as there's other stores like Dick's and Barnes and Noble, and they won't have high, big letters above them.
All right. The sign's illuminated. Is it on a time clock? It doesn't stay on all night.
It does not stay on all night, and it'll be on a time clock to close with the rest of the section.
Okay.
It won't be on excess.
All right, thank you. Anyone on the board have any questions on this application?
Planning?
Planning?
The request to increase the height of the sign is substantial. The previously existing sign was at a max height of 24 feet. Looking at the facade of the building, if the board chose not to approve the 30-foot extension of height, it looks like the sign might be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 17 to 19 feet. So it's at the board discretion what they want to do.
Thank you. Excuse me. Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? Can I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Motion has been made to close the application. It's been seconded. All in favor? Aye. Motion carried. Thank you. You too.
The next case on the agenda, case number 18986, Sharon Bradshaw, 91 Upper Dock Road, Kings Park. The location of the property is the southwest corner of Old Dock Road and Upper Dock Road. The property is zoned NB. The applicant is requesting variances to reduce the minimum front yard setback from 50 feet to 22 feet on Upper Dock Road for an existing 580-square-foot extension, to reduce the minimum front yard setback from 50 feet to 45 feet on Upper Dock Road, and to permit structures within 10 feet of any slope greater than 15% for a proposed 460-square-foot second-story deck.
Good evening.
Good evening. How's it going? Chris and Sharon Bradshaw.
Okay.
This is, as you guys may know, the bluff down there, kind of the bluff property. So it's, as we've learned the hard way, kind of unique that I technically have two front yards as the upper and old dock. So two of these requests are for existing decks that have been there for quite a while. And the other one is the slope greater than 15%. That there was a deck there for probably the last 20 years. As a matter of fact, it was the only way to get up to the second floor, which fell down during some of the renovation process in building a retaining wall. So we just would like to rebuild it, please.
This is just going to be 2 stories. Just 2 stories.
Yes.
Anyone on the board have any questions on this application?
No, thank you.
Planning?
Just a quick question. The proposed second-story deck does not have access from the ground level?
No, sir.
Correct.
Only from the
From interior?
from the interior, the master bedroom, and what I believe is going to be my daughter's or the guest bedroom. We're still
Okay.
negotiating that.
All righty, thank you.
Thank you.
Sabrina?
Mr. Chairman, the property is located with the town's local waterfront revitalization program and will need an LWRP determination from planning. DEW recommends that the applicant contact the planning department for more information. Additionally, the property is also located within the New York State DEC recreational river corridor. DEW recommends that the applicant contact DEC to determine if they will need any permits for this action. Therefore, no decision will be made tonight on this application. Thank you.
We have actually already received the letter of non-jurisdiction from the DEC.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
We have the letter of non-jurisdiction from the DEC already on this. I already received that approval.
If you could forward it to the town, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Would that be planning or
You can send it to planning, and then they'll distribute it to all
Sure,
the
okay.
town. Yeah.
And
Excellent.
the other application has already been submitted as well.
Okay, great. We just want to make
Okay,
sure that
good.
you're aware.
Yes, no, I just wanted to make sure there was nothing else.
Yep.
Okay.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? Can I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved. Second.
Motion has been made to close the application. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
The next application on the agenda is case number 18987, Dina and Douglas Stevens, 6 Glenmere Lane, Comac. The location of the property, the south side of Glenmere Lane, 152 feet west of Tulip Wood Drive. The property is zoned R10. The applicant is requesting a variance to reduce the minimum rear yard setback from 50 feet to 39 feet for a proposed 216-square-foot screen room addition.
Good evening.
Good evening, Christina Bravin, Morano Expediting, 2938 Hempstead Turnpike, Levittown, New York, agent for the applicants.
Paperwork was all submitted.
Yes.
Right? Okay, thank you.
So we are requesting permission to install an 18-foot by 12-foot screen room onto the rear of the existing dwelling. This is an R10 zone, and it requires a 60-foot rear yard setback, and we're proposing a 39-foot setback at the closest point, which is the southwest corner of the structure. At the southeast corner of the structure, we're providing a 43-foot setback. The original home is built with only 58 feet, making it impossible for them to ever comply to the zoning requirement of 60 feet. If the room projects off of the den, and it's only going to be used seasonally, and the southern property line is heavily vegetated, which will screen it from the neighboring home. But they have spoken to the most affected neighbors, and they are in support of the project. If you have any questions, I have a full set of plans here.
Thank you. Does anyone on the board have any questions on this application?
No, thank you.
Planning?
No, thank you.
Anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? No. Can I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved. Second.
Motion has been made to close the application. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next case on the agenda, case number 18988, Sonora Tekar, 1 Sparrow Lane, Hauppauge. The location of the property, the northeast corner of Sparrow Lane and Cardinal Lane. The property is zoned R10. The applicant is requesting variances to reduce the minimum front yard setback from 40 feet to 14 feet on Cardinal Lane for an existing 100-square-foot shed, to reduce the minimum rear yard setback from 50 feet to 46 feet for an existing 303-square-foot deck, to reduce the minimum setback of a 2-foot retaining wall from the property line on Cardinal Lane from 3 feet to 0, to reduce the minimum setback of a 4-foot fence from the top of a 2-foot retaining wall from 2 feet to 0, to increase the height from 4 feet to 6 feet for an existing 4-foot fence on top of a 2-foot retaining wall, to reduce the setback from lot line on Cardinal Lane from 10 feet to 0 for an existing 4-foot fence on top of an existing 2-foot retaining wall.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Soner. My address, 1 Sparrow Line, Hauppauge, 11788. I want to my daughter to talk, help me because I speak English a little. I'm sorry. I
Good
know.
evening, everyone. So we're asking for a variance.
Excuse me, can you just state your name
Of course.
for the record,
Sorry.
please?
My name is Hansa Teker, Teker. The address is 1 Sparrow Lane, Hauppauge, 11788, New York. Yes, HANSA. No problem.
Okay.
So we're here for a variance approval for existing shed and a deck. So the deck is actually 46 feet from the neighbor's backyard, which has to be 50 feet. But all the changes in the garden has been got approval from all the neighborhoods next to us. And also the shed and the deck was existing before we got the house. So from the bills that we have when we got the house, they've been there for like 11, 15 years. So the only changes we had made in the garden was the retaining wall plus the fence. Before that, we had a wood fence there, 6-foot long wood fence. We just replaced that with 2-foot retaining wall on top of 4 feet fence because we brought engineers to the garden to draw like us a plan for it. There was a hill, existing hill before we start doing anything on the garden. And what they told us was once we like even them out to the garden, for the future erosions or anything happens, the retaining wall would like help us to stay stable, like the garden would not get infected for anything happens in the future. And we got the idea actually from all the other neighbors we have around that has the retaining wall there too. But for the shed and the deck we have in there, they were existing before we got the house.
Okay.
All right, thank
Right.
you for listening.
Thank you. Anyone?
I just have a question.
Is there a problem with the cars and making a turn with that 6-foot fence there?
Oh, no, there's no problem with that. There's a walking, yep. If we can go back to the other picture. Yes, so that's the retaining wall is right there in the corner. It's only on the Cardinal Lane part, not the Sparrow Lane. It's just the Cardinal Lane,
Okay,
and it's way before, yeah.
thank you.
No problem.
Anyone else on the board? Planning?
No, thank you. Just one thing, before you
course.
leave, we just need you to fill in some piece of information
Of
that's
course.
missing on one of these.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, no
Okay.
problem.
Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? Can I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved. Second.
Motion has been made to close the application. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you so much for listening. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
The next case on the agenda, case number 18989, Susan Caruso, 30 Alice Lane, Smithtown. The location of the property, the west side of Alice Lane, 260 feet south of Ardra Court. The property is owned R15. The applicant is requesting variances to reduce the side yard setback from 10 feet to 9 feet for an existing 588-square-foot pavilion, to increase the maximum permitted height of a fence from 6 feet to 10 feet for an existing privacy fence, to decrease the minimum setback of a 4-foot retaining wall from the property line from 4 feet to 0 for Wall A, to decrease the minimum setback of a 6-foot retaining wall from the property line from 6 feet to 0 for Wall B, to decrease the minimum setback of a 1-foot retaining wall from the property line from 3 feet to 0 for Wall C.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Carmine Grasso from Cataldo Grasso Architects, office at 14 Carl Avenue in Smithtown. I've submitted the affidavits of mailing and posting and a power of attorney from my client. I represent Susan Caruso in her request for variances to legalize some structures that she has at the rear of her property, and I guess a little retaining wall in the front of the property as well. To start with, the first item is the pavilion. It was actually built 6 inches too close to the side property line. This property is zoned R15, but there was a, when the property was built, there was a modification to the setback, so it was only a 10-foot setback required, and when the pavilion was built, it was built 9 foot 6 inches from the property line. And we feel it's a really minor request, and if you see the photos that were submitted, there should be a photo there. You can see it's completely screened from the neighbor's property by a dense row of evergreens. The second item is the 10-foot-high privacy fence. That fence is at the rear of the property. You can see the top left corner of that photo there and the bottom right. It's at the rear of the house. It's adjacent to their hot tub. Basically, what it's doing is just creating a sightline privacy with the neighbor to the north. You feel that it can only really be seen from the second floor windows, it looks like, from the neighbor's property. They also have a very dense screening on their own side of evergreens there. We feel that this is a good thing to have there because it provides privacy for both the neighbors and my client when my client's in the hot tub. In regards to the retaining walls, retaining wall A was installed to make the ground level around the pool. It has a return. It's a max height of 4 feet, but where it returns by the property line, where it gets to 0 feet, it's only about 8 to 10 inches in height at that point. So it's really a minor request there. With regards to Wall B, that wall runs along the south property line And that was done to make my client's property level so they can use the backyard a little more freely. It also helps prevent runoff on the adjacent site. There's a PVC fence, you can just see it's kind of sideways in the picture there, but there's a PVC fence that runs in front of that wall that shields the wall from view of the neighbor's property. So they're looking at the PVC fence rather than the face of a concrete retaining wall. And then wall C is a small retaining wall at the front yard. It runs alongside the driveway. And what happens is that wall extends past the front property line into the right-of-way. So as part of this application, we're going to cut that back so that it stops at the property line, which is where you get that 0-foot setback. The max height of that wall is only 18 inches, and again, at the point where it meets the property line, it's less than a foot in height. So in regards to the area variance considerations, we feel that there's no undesirable change. The structures we think are attractive and actually enhance the neighborhood. Whether the benefit could be sought by an alternative method, the retaining walls are necessary in order to make the property more usable. The privacy wall, I guess, could be made shorter, but it would kind of negate the whole reason behind making the privacy wall. It would take away the privacy that it creates. And again, the pavilion, it was just mistakenly built 6 inches too close to the property line. If you see the construction in the photos, it's a masonry construction with a fireplace. It would be very difficult to move. Whether we feel the variance requests are substantial, we do not. I think everything is done nicely, and I don't think anything is really a substantial request. Whether the variances will have an adverse impact on the environment. The retaining walls, again, they were done to help prevent stormwater runoff on adjacent properties, so I think that enhances the environmental conditions. And then sanitary flow, there is none associated with these requests, and there's very minimal energy usage. And then finally, whether the alleged difficulty was self-created. Unfortunately, as it was self-created in that my client had this work done without the benefit of obtaining any permits. So we feel that these, the requests we're asking for are fairly minor. We feel that the stuff that was done on the property actually enhances the neighborhood, and we would like to get a positive decision. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
The privacy wall, it's
Yes.
approximately 19 feet from the property line?
You know what, I don't. Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Okay.
And it's behind the house, too. So the only place you really see it is that side of the property.
Right. And you have a note, you're going to remove all the encroachments?
Yes, the encroachment will be removed, yes.
Okay, fine. Does anyone on the board have any questions on this application?
Thank you.
Planning?
No, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Grasso did touch on the encroachments regarding the retaining wall. There is an additional encroachment. The existing vinyl fence in the rear along, I guess that's near Wall A, encroaches up to 6.4 feet onto the neighboring residential parcels, both of them to the west. So DEW recommends the removal or legalization of these encroachments.
Is that what you have a note on here?
Yeah, with regard to that, we submitted, as the property owner has an agreement with the neighbor to allow that fence to be maintained on that property.
It wasn't signed by any of the homeowners.
Oh, it wasn't? Oh, I
It
didn't-
wasn't, and it also only lists one of the residences, not both of them.
Oh, I didn't realize there was more than one resident
Yeah,
back
there's
there, I'm
two.
sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's the woods and then the
There's another line in
Romano's.
between there? I didn't
Yes.
see that, okay.
So,
All right, so either we'll get it legalized or moved, one of the two.
Okay.
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? Can I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made to close the application. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you, have a nice evening.
You too.
The next case on the agenda, case number 18991, TJX Companies, Inc., 371 Smithtown Bypass, Hauppauge. The location of the property is the south side of New York State Route 347, 400 feet west of New York State Route 111. The property is owned NB. The applicant is requesting a variance to increase the maximum height of a wall sign from 15 feet to 20 feet for a proposed 247-square-foot illuminated wall sign.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Michael McCarthy. I'm an attorney with offices at 444 New York Avenue. And I'm here this evening representing TJ Maxx. TJ Maxx is excited to be part of this renovation of the Hauppauge Shopping Center. I do a lot of work with Federal Realty Investment Trust, which owns the shopping center. And TJ Maxx is taking space in the shopping center with the hopes that they're going to open up within the next week. This application, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, is really more driven by aesthetics than by anything else, just a function of, how the sign they feel should be placed upon the building. The sign meets code as far as the size of it, but they're hoping that the board would look favorably upon raising it an additional 5 feet, just for purposes of how it would look in relationship to the frontage of the building. I think the board is familiar with the Hauppauge Shopping Center. It's located on the south side of the Smithtown Bypass, 347. It's a little over 12 acres. I think it's 12.5 acres. Federal Realty Investment Trust owns this shopping centers. They own 4 of them in Huntington. And they've embarked on improving all of their shopping centers, their holdings on Long Island, with great success. And I hope that Smithtown appreciates the amount of time, attention, and money that's been put into it. So I'm here this evening with Chris Bisagno from R&M Engineering. And I can see, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, you're opening up, your plans and your exhibits. Again, it's what you'd expect if you came into a renovated shopping center. The sign is being depicted upon the image that's placed upon the screen, and you have it in front of you. And again, it's more aesthetically driven than it is anything else. Just if you kept it lower, it would kind of look odd. And we thought that if we could raise it by the additional 5 feet, it would kind of balance out the frontage of the building. I'd be happy to walk you through the specifications of the shopping center or the building itself, if the board feels that that would be helpful to your analysis.
I don't think it's necessary.
And
We're all familiar with the area.
well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'm also happy to walk you through the 5 points of the area variance. I think the board can rightfully conclude that, given the TJ Maxx, very reputable retailer, one that you'd find in a shopping center of this style and design as renovated, is in keeping with the pattern of development in the community. We're hoping that you find that the variance requested is not substantial. And we think that, it should not really have an impact upon anyone or cause this board any undue consternation as far as precedent.
Okay. And again, the signs, illuminated sign will be on a time clock to go off with the rest of the signs in the shopping
Correct.
center?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, yes.
Okay. Does anyone on the board have any questions on this application?
No, thank you.
Planning?
No, thank you.
Anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? Can I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Motion's been made to close the application. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I don't think that sign could go any lower.
Yes, we just got it today, so we're still reviewing.
Thank you.
The next case on the agenda, case number 18992, Bronco Cazone, 30 Helen Avenue, Smithtown. The location of the property, the south side of Helen Avenue, 100 feet west of George Street. The property is owned R10. The applicant is requesting a variance to permit environmentally sensitive lands to be altered where depth to groundwater is equal to or less than 10 feet for a proposed 2,520 square foot, two-story single-family dwelling with an attached 325 square foot garage.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Bronco Cuzone. I'm the owner of 30 Helen Avenue in Smithtown, and I would like to have Mr. Angel Ponte speak on my behalf, please.
Fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Mr. Chairman, my name is Angel Aponte. I reside at 1330 Washington Avenue in Bay Shore, and I'm here as the agent for Mr. Bronco Cuzone. I believe it's Blaze, mentioned that we are proposing a two-story house here with an attached garage on environmentally sensitive lands, which is because of the high water table on this property. I'd like the board to understand that our engineering team has addressed the structural requirements for these soft soils via helical piles. And if there's any questions from the board, I'd like to try to answer them.
Was there a house on
There-
the property before?
There was,
Okay.
previous
gone.
to Mr. Cuzone's ownership. Right.
Oh, okay. Okay. Anyone on the board have any questions on this application?
Does he have, you have a test hole?
Yes, ma'am.
What is the test hole?
I actually filed it with a few DEW today. It was 5.8.
5.8, thank you.
Planning?
Just one question. Will there be a basement or will it be on a slab?
No basement. It's actually a crawl space for utilities and piping and electrical.
And do you know how high above the groundwater level it will be?
2 feet
2
to the
feet?
bottom of the footing.
Okay.
And the actual space inside is a little over 3 feet 5 inches.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we did receive the test hole this afternoon, so we're currently still reviewing the information, so no decision will be made tonight.
Great. Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? Sir? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Adam Hogan. I'm at 28 Helen Avenue, Smithtown, 11787. I live right next door to the said property there. I was just, wanted to find out exactly what was going to be going on there. If they're going to be raising up the ground, the groundwater is very high in the whole area. There's a very big problem on that corner with the heavy rains, and the streets flood. My property floods, and then a couple of properties flood when the rain's very heavy. I mean, it can rain somewhat heavy, and I can get water in the garage, and you can't drive down the street. So, I mean, that problem is one thing that needs to be addressed, but that's what I wasn't sure if they're going to be raising that property up over there, and am I going to get additional runoff from that property? But the big problem is the street. I mean, the drainage is non-existent when it rains kind of heavy. It's just, it'll flood very quickly.
Okay.
I don't know what else I can say, so thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else? Anyone else like to be heard on this application? No? Sir? You're not changing the grade at all, are you?
No, sir.
No? Grade's not being changed. The grade's not being changed. And you're gonna have to contain all the water on your own property
Yes, sir.
when you go through engineering.
Yep, drainage and sanitary is all
Yeah.
according to Suffolk County guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Can I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Motion has been made to close the application. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.
The next application on the agenda is 18993 Lance Mueller, 30 Mark Drive, Smithtown. The location of the property is the south side of Mark Drive, 230 feet west of Mallard Lane. The property is owned R21. The applicant is requesting a variance to reduce the minimum front yard setback from 50 feet to 46 feet for a proposed 60-square-foot portico.
Good evening.
Hi, my name is Lance Mueller, owner of 30 Mark Drive. I have Todd O'Connell to speak on my behalf.
Fine, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Todd O'Connell, doing business at 1200 Veterans Highway, Hauppauge, New York, architect for Lance Mueller. So, as you see, we're here for what I would consider to be an extremely minor application here. We have an existing house. There's really no coverage, no protection over the front door. So we're doing two things. We're trying to give some protection from the elements by adding a portico, as well as that portico will add some character to the existing home. Obviously, this is going to add character to the neighborhood. It's not going to cause any undesirable effect to the surrounding neighborhood. There is no other way we could have achieved some protection over the front door without being before you here today. It's a minor request. It is not substantial. No negative environmental impacts. And this is a proposed application. And would love to hear any comments the board may have.
Fine, thank you. Does anyone on the board have any questions on this application?
Thank you.
Planning.
No, thank you.
DEW does have one minor comment. It is in the New York State Recreational River Corridor. We would like the applicant to know that they may have to contact DEC to determine if you need any permits for this action.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? No. Can I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made to close the application. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.
The next case on the agenda is case number 18994, Mark Majuri, 59 Woodland Lane, Smithtown. The location of the property is the north side of Woodland Lane, 119 feet west of Ivy Hill Drive. The property is owned R21. The applicant is requesting variances to reduce the minimum side yard setback from 16 feet to 12 feet, to reduce the total side yards from 34 feet to 23 feet, for a proposed 473-square-foot, one-story addition, to increase the maximum permitted paved surface in the side yard from 25% to 80% for existing pavers.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Mark Majori. I live at 59 Woodland Lane, Smithtown, 11787, and I'd like Ken Shulman to speak on my behalf.
Fine, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Ken Schulman, 209 Lynn Avenue, East Northport. We're proposing a one-story addition to expand the existing living room. The addition will extend 15 feet out from the side of the house and wrap around to the front of the house and wrap around the side of the house, extending 6 feet towards the side property line. The addition will reduce the existing side yard setback of 18.9 feet to 12.9 feet, where 16 feet is the minimum setback. We are also seeking to reduce the required total side yard from 34 feet to 23 feet. Currently, the total side yard is a non-conforming 30 feet, and that measurement is taken from a small metal shed, which is attached to the house on the west side. The actual total side yard taken from the main dwelling would be 32 feet, which is only 2 feet short of the required minimum. The other variance we're seeking is to maintain pavers, which are around the existing side shed and extend around the in-ground pool to the rear. The pavers cover 80% of the western side yard, where 25% is the maximum permitted. I don't believe these variances would have an impact on the adjacent properties of the neighborhood, since the property to the west is well screened from the pavers by dense, tall evergreens, and we have submitted a consent letter from that neighbor.
The property to the east is a corner property, and their house is approximately 50 feet away from the proposed addition. In addition, these variances are not substantial because they will only decrease the existing non-conforming aggregate side yard by an additional 7 feet and the minimum side yard by only 4 feet. Because the topography of this property slopes 20 feet from the front to the back, it creates a difficulty in finding any other alternative suitable flat area to build an addition that would not require any variances. There is also a rear deck and a pool in the rear that prevents any addition from being put there that would be conforming to the setbacks. The benefit of this topography is that at the street, the elevation is much higher than at the front of the house, so from the streetscape, this will have very little visual impact to anybody passing by the house. The house is also at the end of a cul-de-sac, so there's really not a lot of traffic passing by the house. The topography also dictated that the in-ground pool was placed pretty close to the side yard. That's why a lot of that paving area around the pool is counting in the side yard setback, and that's what's making it the 80% mark instead of the 25%.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone on the board have any questions on this application?
No, thank you.
Planning?
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? May I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Second. Motion has been made to close the application. It's been seconded. All in favor? Aye. Motion carried. Thank you.
The next case on the agenda is case number 18996, Jennifer Mello, 11 Partridge Drive, Comac. The location of the property, the southeast corner of Partridge Drive and Grouse Place. The property is zoned R15. The applicant is requesting a special exception to permit temporary living quarters for a family member. A variance of a special exception standard to increase the maximum square footage permitted from 658 square feet to 906 square feet for the temporary living quarters. Variance to reduce the minimum front yard setback on Partridge Drive from 45 feet to 44 feet. A variance to reduce the minimum front yard setback on Grouse Drive from 45 feet to 29 feet. Variance to reduce the minimum side yard setback from 16 feet to 12 feet. Variance to reduce the minimum rear yard setback from 60 feet to 41 feet for proposed 1,491 square foot first floor addition, 24 square foot front porch, 20 square foot side portico, and 367 square foot attached garage.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Vincent Tremarco. I represent the applicant. I've submitted the affidavits of posting and mailing to Mr. Mazzeo. As this board knows, this is a special exception for temporary living quarters, in this case for Ms. Mello's mom, who is finally leaving her large house and coming to live with her daughter. If you look at the application, you will see the first variance is front yard from 45 to 44, which obviously we think is de minimis. The second variance reduced the front yard from, this is a corner property. So one of the problems we have is the fact that although people love to live on corner properties, they have two front yards, and having two front yards, you're limited to your setbacks, as the board well knows. In any event, the reducing of the minimum front yard on Grouse Drive from 45 to 29 is placated by the recommendation of the planning department, which is to leave the large trees that run along Grouse Drive to make it sort of a barrier between the road and the applicant's application. Reduce the minimum side yard from 16 to 12. Again, we don't see that as an issue. Variance to reduce minimum rear yard from 60 to 41. Again, as stated in the recommendation of the Planning Department, many variances have been granted similar to this in the area by this board. I've explained to my client this is a temporary application. It's only good for 3 years. They know that after 3 years, or Ms. Mello knows that she's got to come back and request from the board the right to have the temporary living quarters. Also, the recommendation of the Planning Department indicates that it is easily put back to an existing one-family dwelling. Also, the FAR, even though it appears a rather large extension, we're within the FAR floor area ratio for the R15 district. And finally, there is a question raised by our environmental department, DEW, with respect to cesspools. My client's architect, Tom Walsh, already has contacted the health department. The health department feels that the new cesspool system must be installed. We have advised the clients of that effect, and she knows that she'll be putting in the new, very expensive cesspool system. So we asked the board for its favorable consideration. We don't think it will change the character of the area. Can this be achieved by some other method? Well, I guess we could reduce the size, but in this case, we asked the board to consider the fact that Mom has lived in a very big house all her life, so she needs a little bit of walking room in the present situation. Whether the requested area variance is substantial, some of them are, but again, they're mitigated by the recommendations of the Planning Department. Whether the variance would have an adverse impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood, we don't think it'll have any adverse effect on the neighborhood, and we did indicate we are already in the health department making the application for the new sanitary system. Whether the difficulty was self-created, yes, we did buy a corner plot, but in every subdivision, or most subdivisions, you end up with corner plots, and they have their good things about them and the bad things. In this case, it has engendered a few variances that we wouldn't need if it were an inside plat. So we ask the board for its favorable consideration. If you have any questions, I'll try and answer them.
All right, thank you. Does anyone on the board have any questions on this application?
Thank you.
No, thank you. Planning?
Well, Mr. Chairman, since Mr. Tramarko stole my comments, the only thing I can say is we prepared a planning advisory report based on extensive review of the application. Although there is a rather substantial increase in the floor area of the temporary living quarters, we felt that between the fact that the existing large diameter trees could help provide a buffer to the residents, I believe it's to the east and to the north, that and the fact that they do meet the FAR for the zoning district, we felt that it would be recommended to be approved by the board.
All right, thank you. Sabrina?
Mr. Chairman, as Mr. Tramarko has stated, the application to add additional bedrooms requires approval from the Suffolk County Department of Health. Lastly, to ensure full compliance with our environmental review, we wish to consider information presented by the applicant and any comments from the public before we make a recommendation to the board. Therefore, no decision will be made tonight on this application.
That's fine.
Right. Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? Can I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Motion has been made to close the application. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The next case on the agenda, case number 18995, Alexandra Pignata and Ryan Toda, 7 Callahan Road, Fort Salonga. The location of the property is the southwest corner of Callahan Road and Callahan Road, 167 feet north of Fort Salonga Road, New York State Route 25A. The property is zoned R21. The applicant is requesting variances to reduce the minimum lot area from 21,780 square feet to 12,882 square feet, which is existing, to reduce the minimum front yard setback on the east property side from 50 feet to 45 feet, to reduce the minimum front yard setback on the south side from 50 feet to 22 feet, to reduce the minimum rear yard setback from 75 feet to 58 feet for an existing 820 square foot dwelling, to reduce the minimum front yard setback on the east side from 50 feet to 44 feet for a proposed 120 square foot roof over porch and second-story addition, to reduce the minimum front yard setback from 50 feet to 22 feet on the south side, and reduce the minimum rear yard setback from 75 feet to 56 feet for a proposed 926 square foot second-story addition.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Alexandra Pagnata, owner of 7 Callahan Road, Northport, New York. I have here Ken Schulman to speak on my behalf, please.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening again. Ken Schulman, 209 Lynn Avenue, East Northport. We are seeking to maintain the existing 820 square foot one-story dwelling built in 1951. The dwelling is on an undersized lot for the R21 zoning district it is in. It is also a corner property and does not meet the minimum 50-foot front yard setbacks on both of its front yards, and as well as not having the minimum required 75-foot rear yard setback. We are also proposing to expand the existing dwelling by building first and second floor additions and a front covered porch. The second floor addition will maintain the existing 22-foot front yard on the south side of Callahan and maintain the 40-foot front yard on the east side of Callahan. The proposed front porch will only reduce the existing 45-foot front yard setback by 1 foot to 44 feet, and the proposed second floor addition will have a rear cantilever that will only reduce the existing non-conforming rear yard of 58 feet by an additional 2 feet to 56 feet. I believe these proposed additions will not have any adverse impacts on the adjacent property to the rear, since it's a 3-story commercial building which fronts on Route 25A, and the adjacent property to the north is well screened by a row of dense, tall evergreens. Additionally, there's also a row of dense evergreens on the Callahan side, so the south side of Callahan, the property across the street, is also well screened. The variance is not substantial since the proposed additions will only reduce the existing rear setback by 2 feet and the existing front setback by 1 feet. The renovated dwelling will still be very much in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. And since the existing dwelling is a non-conforming structure, there is nothing that we could build on this property without coming before the board. The difficulty was not created by my clients since they have recently purchased the house without the knowledge that the existing house was non-conforming and didn't have any COs. Their hope is to greatly improve this property and grow their family there while enjoying their renovated house for many years to come. Thank you.
Anyone on the board have any questions on this application?
Thank
Planning?
Mr. Chairman, when the application was submitted to the Planning Department, apparently the applicant was informed that an LWRP determination review was not necessary in order for the board and for the Environmental Department to issue a secra and for the board to make a decision. After several conversations between planning staff and building department staff and environmental staff, there is some confusion as to whether or not it does or it doesn't. Tomorrow, we are scheduled to have a meeting between the three departments to make a final determination whether or not that review will be required. We wanted to let the applicant know in advance. In the event that that is the case, there is a slight possibility that we may need to have a second hearing because it may affect the amount of FAR that they are permitted to have within the LWRP.
Thank you.
Um,
Sabrina?
To ensure full compliance with our environmental review, we wish to consider information presented by the applicant and any comments received by the public before we make a recommendation to the board. Therefore, no decision will be made tonight. Thank you.
All right. Do you have any questions?
I had originally filed the application, and then they had a discussion that it wasn't needed, so they gave the application back to me. So I guess we'll have a further conversation after your meeting.
We're hoping to have a final determination tomorrow morning, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
No problem.
Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? Oh, come on up. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Arlene Lauren, L-A-U-R-E-N. I'm one of the owners of number 6 Callahan's Road. Our property goes from number 7 along 25A to the park, the Sunken Meadow State Park. And it is a property which was decided to be a property that should be protected because the house is something like 300 years old. And we have a large pond in front of the property. During one of the hurricanes that we had in the last few years, there were several adjoining ponds between our property and Long Island Sound, I believe, and the other ponds were completely wiped out. Ours still remains because it has a dam that prevented it from being washed into Long Island Sound. And we are required by whoever decides these things, we are required to remain in a natural state for a certain distance from the borders of that pond, which goes right up to Callahan's Road across the street from the property in question. And if you look at the zoning map, it shows that our pond appears to be fed from the ground that's underneath the property that's looking for the variance. So for one thing, I'm very concerned that if they're going to do a lot of construction, I don't want it to impact the feeding of our pond, which we are also required to maintain in its current state. It has a lot of wildlife from the park that comes over onto the property and so on. And I'm also concerned that I don't know where their water level is. I don't know if they've checked that. I don't know if their construction is going to be affecting the water level or going down. I have no idea. But I think it should be checked. And of course also if it should maintain the character of the neighborhood, since our house is considered to be a historic house. We're not allowed to, we're not allowed to alter the exterior of our house without permission from somebody in Smithtown, I don't know. So I'm just concerned about a few things because of that. So I don't know if they've looked into those things,
We'll ask.
like the water level and
Yep.
so on.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. 1 second. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this? No one else? Okay, Ken.
We did submit a test boring to the building department. It was over 10 feet the depth of water. And as far as the historic nature, there is a gated community across the street where the houses don't appear older than 20-some-odd years old that are very large houses, considerably larger than what we're proposing, that certainly are not anywhere as close to 300 years old.
Right. You're not putting a basement in this, are you?
There currently is a basement. The new addition will have a basement as well.
Okay.
But like I said, the depth of water was over 10 feet.
Okay. No. Everybody gets one opportunity.
That's
All
all,
right.
that's all I wanted to add.
Okay. Thank you. Can I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Second. Motion has been made to close the application. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.
The next case on the agenda is case number 1890, Diane Malazzo, 156 St. James Avenue South in St. James. The location of the property is the west side of St. James Avenue South, 700 feet east of Rutherford Street. The property is zoned R10. The applicant is requesting a special exception to permit living quarters for a parent, a variance of a special exception standard to increase the square footage of temporary living quarters from 600 square feet to 1,027 square feet. Variance of a special exception, variance to reduce the minimum front yard setback from 25 feet to 23 feet, to reduce the minimum side yard setback from 12 feet to 9 feet, to increase the maximum gross floor area of the lot from 30% to 35% for a proposed 1,174 square foot two-story addition, to reduce the minimum rear yard setback from 35 feet to 24 feet for an existing 385 square foot deck, to reduce the minimum distance from any lot line from 6 feet to 4 feet for an existing 129 square foot, 11-foot high shed.
Good evening.
Hi, my name is Diane Malazzo. Good evening, everyone. I live at 156 St. James Avenue South. I would like Mr. Connor to speak for me, please.
Fine, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the board. Again, for the record, Todd O'Connell, doing business at 1200 Veterans Highway, Hauppauge, New York, architect for the Malazzos. So, to tell you a little bit about the application, obviously, as you know, we're looking for the parents to move into the house, a very, very large family, and they're just looking to, keep everybody in the same household. The property itself, where we felt it was the best place to put this addition is where the existing garage is. But the space with what some of their needs were, we needed a little bit more square footage to accommodate what their goals are. We understand that's what's before you. We're asking for quite a few items or some relief, some which we could mitigate, which I'll speak about. We had a planning board memo, so we could talk about some mitigation measures that we would be willing to do. And some would be very difficult to mitigate, knowing what the requirements are. But to talk about some of the relief sought, we're requesting a side yard relief on this two-story addition where 12 foot's required and 9 foot's proposed. We're actually 9.6 feet is actually what we're looking for. It is we feel it's the character of the neighborhood. The neighboring house has a setback of 9.2 feet to the side yard. So, we do feel that we're keeping the character, and in keeping with that, the aggregate setback on this particular property is substantial. We have 42-foot aggregate on this, 37.8 feet aggregate on this structure with 28's required. So yes, although we're a little bit close on the one side, we feel that the aggregate is so large that it really, keeps the density of the house in keeping. The neighboring house to the left, they're 21.5 feet to their house, so there's quite a bit of distance between the homes. And with that said, we felt that this was, a fair request to ask for. In addition, the reason why that setback was so important to attain is if you went to your second floor plan of what were proposed, with the amount of rooms that we're looking to get for the children, these rooms are only just over 9 feet. They're not big rooms. So we're looking at 19 foot wide. Once you get the wall thicknesses and we have the 2 rooms in the front, they're very small rooms. To try to push that setback over a little bit more would really, have rooms that would just be unfair to the children. Very, very tiny. And that's one of the items that, kind of led to the width that we put before you this evening. The front yard relief that we're asking for of the 23.2, that is something that I've seen this board grant before. It is actually to a cantilever. That does not, or an overhang. It does not go down to the ground. It's the second floor that cantilevers out. The lower floor actually does meet the required setbacks on the home itself. As far as the temporary living quarters, the actual quantity of the of the apartment is 970. With all due respect to the planning board, I'm not exactly sure how they came up with the 1,000. I think they included a second floor bedroom, which was actually part of the main house. The second floor had a small section that was carved out that was not part of the apartment. So the apartment size is actually 970 square feet. But to mitigate it even further, the whole idea is this family to move back together, to live all together. It can have an open flow. All right, if I create that open flow, it's really not even an apartment anymore. It's because if you went to your second floor, you'll see a hallway where a closet. I could keep that hallway open, create an open flow, and it's really just one open flow then, and the only thing that they need is a second kitchen. It's really no longer even an apartment. We were just trying to give the mom a little bit more privacy, but if the board seemed that would make a large difference in the application, then that would be our answer, to keep that open flow, and it's really no longer even an apartment. The same family members are still going to be there. So that was, kind of the theory behind the request that we were asking for in terms of the square footage that was before you. As far as the deck in the back, the planning board members, this is something that has been granted. It's a high ranch. Anytime you have a high ranch, you don't want to be always running downstairs to, be entertaining. You want to be able to walk out your dining room and entertain, barbecue, have your friends over, and so it's an open deck. It's not enclosed. It's going to remain open, but it's, we feel that, it's not a substantial request, even though the distance seems like it's a lot to ask for. This is an open deck structure, and it's definitely within keeping of other variances that have been approved in the past. The shed can, it's a small shed. It has a slab in it. It'd be very difficult to move. It's important for storage. Is it possible to move? Yes, but with the slab, it's kind of difficult to do so without incurring a lot of expense. It's only just over 120 square feet. It's a very small shed, but, unfortunately, they weren't aware that they needed permits for a shed, like most people don't know, but, it was brought to their attention upon presenting this application this evening. As far as the floor area ratio, again, you could see the size of the rooms. We're not asking for any, of the quantity that they need. It's a 35% request where 30% is permitted. The square footage is critical to what they need. If we were forced to reduce it, I'm not sure where we would go, but we want to work with the board to make everybody happy. It's really, you could see the size of the rooms. These are not large spaces that we're asking for. With the comments of an undesirable change to the character of the neighborhood, with respect to the planning, I understand that, some of their opinions. We don't feel there would be because, again, we have very large setbacks on the opposing side, and we feel that the overall setbacks of the house would, be in character. And it goes with the apartment, because we don't even need to call this thing an apartment. It can be an open flow and the apartment item goes away. And then I'm not even asking for a larger apartment than other ones that were approved. They want the privacy, but, we could really just designate the first floor by itself as the apartment without the second floor. We understand that some of these requests do seem substantial. I tried to, give a little background of why we feel that it was necessary to ask for some of these items. As far as could have it been accomplished in other ways, we tried. I mean, you can see how small these rooms are. These are not large rooms at all. I've talked about other ways that we could address the apartment issue, which we would be willing to do. It's a proposed application. We're here tonight to, ask for some important reliefs that my clients need. And with all that said, love to answer any questions the board may have.
Okay. I have concerns with the 35% FAR. That's substantial.
I understand.
In an R10. On the application, it says the square footage of the living quarters is 1,027, but you're saying it's
970.
970. Okay. All right. Anyone on the board have any questions on the application?
Okay.
Planning?
Mr. Chairman, everybody received a copy of the Planning Advisory Report. You all know what it contains, so I don't really need to review it. Just to offer a little bit of information of what Mr. O'Connell revealed regarding the size of the temporary living quarters. We go by what's put on the application. What was put on the application is 1,027 square feet. If in fact it is 970 square feet, it does help the size of the temporary living quarters slightly. It does help the FAR slightly. The percentage of the increase of the temporary living quarters drops from 71% to 62%, and the FAR would drop from 35% to 34%. As noted in the report, there was a neighbor directly behind the applicant who had a similar application, I believe about 5 or 6 years ago. Temporary living quarters for a parent with an addition being added to the home. They did a temporary living quarters of 610 square feet with a floor area ratio of 34%. So comparatively speaking, that's what we offer the board for consideration.
Thank you. Sabrina?
Mr. Chairman, to ensure full compliance with our environmental review, we wish to consider information presented by the applicant and any comments from the public before we make a recommendation to the board. Therefore, no decision will be made tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? No. Can I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Second. Motion has been made to close the application. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too.
The next case on the agenda is case number 18761, Farm to Table, Smithtown Realty LLC, 273 Smithtown Boulevard, Wisconsin. The location of the property is the north side of Smithtown Boulevard, 968 feet east of Nichols Road. The property is zoned NB. The applicant is requesting variances to reduce the minimum front yard setback from 50 feet to 30 feet, to reduce the minimum required parking from 51 to 41 spaces, to reduce the minimum required truck loading spaces from 1 to 0, for a proposed two-story, 5,493 square foot commercial building with 608 square foot roof over porch.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm Philomena Lombardi. It's Filomena, and Lombardi is Lombardi. I live at 760 Johnson Avenue, Ronkonkoma, New York, 11779. And I am going to ask Jacqueline Peranto to speak on my behalf this evening.
Fine, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Jacqueline Peranto. I'm principal at Key Civil Engineering, located at 664 Blue Point Road, Holtzville, New York, 11742. I would like to note that this is a continuation of the August 9th, 2022 board meeting, same case number, 18761. And on July 27th of this year, the board voted to reopen this case. We assume all the minutes and testimony from the August 9th, 2022 hearing will become part of tonight's presentation as well. We are here tonight to discuss the application known as the proposed two-tenant building located at 273 Smithtown Boulevard in Nesconset. It is on the north side, the property is located on the north side of Smithtown Boulevard, approximately 1,000 feet west of Nichols Road. It's also known on the Suffolk County tax map as District 800, Section 168, Block 6, Lot 6. The property is zoned neighborhood business and is 0.595 acres. The uses proposed are permitted as of right. Since the initial presentation to the board, the building has been modified to provide two separate tenants. Tenant A is located on the north side of the building. Tenant A will be a cafe with less than 16 seats, and it will provide storage of dry goods as well as the refrigeration units for food to be located in the basement. Very similar, the operation is very similar to a deli. The area in the basement has been reduced from the original application. It was 3,936 square feet. It's been reduced to 2,835 square feet under this proposal. The other tenant located on the south end of the building, Tenant B, will be a hall. There's no cooking facility in the hall. It's very similar to like a VFW hall. The hall is a space that can be rented for parties, events, or meetings. Food can be brought in from third parties, and there's also a partial second floor connected to Tenant B that would be used for storage, additional chairs, tables, and the like. Just to summarize the building areas, so the total first floor did not change. The footprint of the building, it's still 3,936 square feet. The cafe on the first floor is 2,205 square feet. The hall space is 1,731 square feet on the first floor. The site layout is essentially the same as what was last presented to the board. The trash enclosure has been relocated to the northwest corner of the property, farthest from the residences. And we've now added a loading space onto the site plan. So this will eliminate our request for the loading stall variance. However, the project will still require two variances. Under section 322(9A), a parking variance is still required. The denial and prior site plan denoted 51 stalls are required. However, the reduction of cellar floor area and storage use in the cellar and second floor reduced the parking requirement to 48. The site still provides 41 stalls. The parking variance now being sought is from 48 to 41, or 14.58% variance, where the prior request was a reduction from 51 to 41 with 19.61% variance. The building size is the minimum size practical to still allow the businesses to operate as they need, and therefore we feel the parking variance is not substantial. Under section 32262, the building will require a front yard building setback. The code requires 50 feet. The building design and placement on the site is still the same, requiring a front yard setback variance of 30 feet to the roof overhang, and it's 33 feet to the face of the building. The proposed use is consistent with those in the neighborhood, retail, office, restaurants. The building setback is consistent with what is along the corridor. The building to the west of the subject property is set back about 20 feet, and the building to the east of the subject property is set back about 15 feet. Placement on the site is consistent with the other buildings along this corridor. There is residential located to the north of the property, and as such, there'll be a 6-foot-high solid wood fence as well as 6-foot-tall evergreens. We're proposing eastern red cedars to be located in the 10-foot-wide buffer adjacent to the residences. The site will be developed with lighting, all in compliance with town standards, dark sky compliant, LED, shielded to not shine on adjoining properties and specifically the neighbors' properties, the residential properties. A new IA sanitary system will be designed and approved in accordance with the Health Department standards, and proposed drainage will also be provided in accordance with town standards. Can also just submit to the board for record. I received a comment letter from the Health Department just today, and I'd like to turn this in as an exhibit. It just indicates there's 2 outstanding comments, one being they're looking for the town secret determination, and the second being a covenant that's being placed on the approval that we need to file a covenant with the Health Department.
I'll make it part of the record. Thank you.
Approval of these variances would not impact the adjacent neighboring properties, as the site will contain all stormwater runoff and meet the design requirements of the town for the development. The request is not substantial, as it is in line with other building setbacks along the roadway corridor, and the parking variance is minor. The benefit cannot be achieved in other means, as the building is the minimum size possible to operate properly. Pushing the building back to meet a front yard setback would reduce the parking and also place the building closer to residences, not providing a better alternative. The variances would not cause an adverse impact to the environment, as it is not an over-intensification of the property. The use meets sanitary density, will handle all stormwater runoff, and will comply with all other land development guidelines in the town. The development is consistent with other developments in this area. The difficulties of these variances was not created by the applicant, as the parcel size is such that placing an adequate sized building for the tenant's operation results in the 2 variances being sought tonight. With that, I'd like to open it up to questions.
Okay. Any cooking done on the premise?
Cooking is done in the cafe. There is no cooking, there's no kitchen in the hall.
Okay.
So similar, that's why I compared it to a deli, similar to a deli. You can call the cafe and you can order catering to be delivered to your home, or being picked up for a Saturday barbecue, or wherever you may choose. Potentially, you can rent out the adjacent space and you can cater food and have it there.
Okay. So your client will be tenant A. Is tenant B a different party, or is that still your client?
It's a different entity, but it is owned and operated by Philomena, but it's a different business.
Okay. So you could rent out that space and then you would cater it?
You could rent out that space and order bagels from the deli down the road.
No,
You
I
don't
understand.
have to order food from her to rent that
Right.
space. It's independent.
But you could?
But you could.
Okay. The dumpster enclosure, it's still up in the
West.
northwest corner?
Yes.
Pretty close to the residence?
It complies with the required setbacks. It'll be a masonry enclosure with gates in the front.
Does anyone else?
Right, directly behind us to the west is a commercial business. If you were to look at a Google map, the residences are on a cul-de-sac, so they're more off on the east side of us.
Okay. Anyone else on the board have any questions on this application?
No.
Planning?
No questions, Mr. Chairman, just a note that I believe one of the neighbors to the north in the residence district did send in a letter to the board with some concerns about the removal of the existing buffer.
Okay. I think, yeah. All right. We'll get to you. Sabrina?
To ensure full compliance with our environmental review, we wish to consider information presented by the applicant and any comments received by the public before making a recommendation to the board. Therefore, no decision will be made tonight on this application. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone in the audience like to be heard on this application? Come on up, sir.
Good evening. My name is Craig Thyberg. I live at 29 Rolling Hills Drive in Nesconset. We own the property exactly to the north of the plot right there. So the biggest concern, honestly, is right on the other side of the fence is my pool. See that blue line? It's red and then it goes blue where their property, yeah, right there. That's my pool. So you were saying the dumpster is right close. The dumpster is right on the other side of the pool. The cars, if you go back to the other picture, you could see the cars, those parking spots. You know, if somebody comes out and puts it in forward instead of reverse or the other way around, they go through the fence and into my pool. So although we appreciate, you know, we've been at the previous meetings here where we put some concerns in, and I think some of the concerns have been mitigated. But I'd like to go on record of you know, a couple of individual things as we listed in the email. You know, the first one, of course, is the pool area. Our patio goes right back to it. The pool is right there. We have a 6-foot fence that we just put there. You know, but the parking, it goes right into it, and the dumpster is right there. So we're hoping maybe we can or they can put a berm there and lift up the fence to protect it from cars going forward, and to raise any elevation of the plants that they're suggesting. That would be appreciated. I'm glad you touched on the lighting. You know, it used to be woods. For decades, it was woods, and now it's going to be a building right in our backyard. So the lighting, I didn't see any lighting poles on the drawings. I'm assuming there's going to be some on the building. I want to just make sure that they're not on 24 hours a day. You know, we like to have a nice peaceful area back there. It's news to me now that it's going to be a rental hall. That's different than what it was the first time that we were here talking about it. It was just another area that they were going to be using, but I guess they rearranged it or whatever. So, you know, I'm concerned with who's going to be renting it out. How long are they going to be there? Are they going to be there until 2 o'clock in the morning? You know, it's right on the other side of that is a residential. Yes, that street, it's got building, it's got commercial property on it. But, you know, this is our home. We talked about the dumpster. Security. So I appreciate that they are putting a gate in. You know, and I'd like to make sure that that gate is closed even after these parties that they're going to be hosting there or renting out. So I don't know how that's going to take place, but we want to make sure that nobody goes back there and, you know, ducks back in there for whatever purposes they may have, you know, kids or whomever back in the area behind the store and out of the sight of the road. Excuse me. And then right now we understand that it's a cafe, and it's actually, you know, I've actually been there. I enjoy their food at one of the other locations. But what does the future look like? Is it going to have a liquor license? Can that just be squashed and not allowed to have that? There's going to be a hall with rented parties there. Can they bring booze in there? And are they going to be there until all? That's all brand news, and that's even giving us further concern for it. And then lastly, the fence. You know, can we put up an 8-foot fence instead of a 6-foot fence? Can they put a berm up? They're going to put the 6-foot trees. Are they going to be eventually 6 foot, or are they going to be 6 foot when they're planted? That I don't know. But we're worried for, you know, the current tenants, you know, and you know, we've spoken before. They're very, very nice people. We don't have issue with that at all. God bless. But what about the future owners? What if this doesn't work out? Who are they going to sell to next, and what is it going to turn into next? We don't need a bar, you know, on the other side of the property. So for a residential area, right on the opposite side, my home, our biggest investment, you know, we just want to make sure that we're protected in some way.
Thank you.
Okay. And I also attached to the email, I put a picture of the pool.
Yeah, we have that.
Okay, okay. Right on the other side of the the concern. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you so very much.
All right, thank you.
If I may address some of those concerns.
Certainly, please.
And thank you for mentioning it because I didn't. We do have fencing around the entire property and there will be gates across the driveway. So when the business is closed, the property will be secure. So there will be security fencing provided.
What are the hours of the business?
I will let Philomena answer that question. I also wanted to just clarify that the hall, as much as I did compare it to a VFW hall, it's much, much smaller. It's 41 seats, and it's, I think I said 17, let me just get the number correct, 1,731 square feet. So it will not be a large party per se. For the most part, and she can explain the type of personnel that typically would come, baby showers, bridal showers, Sunday afternoons, that kind of a thing. The dumpster is located approximately, I just kind of scaled it off here, it's about 12 feet. It's a little bit past the 10-foot buffer based on its angle, so it's about 12 feet off of our property line. And again, we do have that 12-foot buffer with the 6-foot high fence. I heard 8-foot high fence, code only permits 6. We didn't ask, we don't have that variance before the board tonight to go with an 8, but, so that's why we're putting the 6, which is what's permitted by code. And I'll let Philomena answer business hours of operation.
Currently, I operate my business. We open up at 10 a.m. and we close the cafe at 6 p.m. Most of the events that I hold are little showers. You know, this room, that's what it's really going to predominantly be used for, people to have a shower in the Saturday and Sunday. You know, that's usually when I do those kinds of parties. I mean, I also cater events at the Brush Barn, same thing, you know. They're not meant to be parties that run late. I sure as heck don't want to be there late, you know, so that is something that, you know, is not my vision. Our minutes from the first time we proposed this building, it did indicate that the adjacent room I was going to use as an event space, which is typically what, you know, is exactly what Jackie is explaining. It's similar to a VFW hall, so this wasn't the first time I said this, it's the second. People can have a shower in it, use it as an off-premise site. I mean, and I really do not plan on going for a liquor license. There's really no purpose to that for me. You know, if anything, they might have a mimosa, you know, that's under a beer and wine license. Not looking to have that kind of an event. So I know that I was speaking with the neighbors and kind of reassuring them that that's not the case. I don't plan on selling the property. I'm going to work as long as I can. I love what I do. I love making people happy, and I like making delicious food. So unless I can't make it, I don't really don't foresee selling the property.
Will there be lighting on the building?
She can answer that question.
We're still working on our lighting design, but yes, we are proposing to have minimal lighting. It'll be shut off once the business closes.
And it'll be shielded from the residents.
Absolutely, yeah. The maximum height permitted by code, I believe, is 18 foot for any pole-mounted lights. Sometimes placing them, putting it along the rear with a back shield is better than putting it opposite because there's a perception of looking up at a light. So we'll be very aware and conscious as we put that lighting plan together. And we are putting an application together to planning. We're currently waiting on a tree survey, which is one of the requirements for our submission, is a land clearing and tree preservation plan. So once we get the tree survey, we can also see if there's you know, a tree located along that common rear lot line that potentially can be maintained.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made to close the application. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.
The next case on the agenda, case number 18944, John Barnett, 148 Southern Boulevard, Nesconset. The location of the property, the west side of Southern Boulevard, 211 feet north of Wasaki Court. The property is zoned R15. The applicant is requesting a variance to reduce the minimum front yard setback from 45 feet to 22 feet for an existing 6-foot PVC fence.
Good evening.
Good evening, Board. Requesting an adjournment. I'm working with the Director of Planning, Peter Hans, to come with a mutual agreement with the 4 neighbors concerning the variance.
You met with Peter at the property, right?
He needs the contact information for the 4 neighbors. The last I spoke with him, he needs either the phone number or email. And we're going to do one last meeting and then see what happens.
It's what?
Close the hearing?
All right. Okay. We're going to close the hearing, and we'll get that information and see where it goes. But if it doesn't lead anywhere, there's nothing this board can do.
Yeah, I understand that. Peter's he's working with Highway Department to replace the curb, and
They were there.
yeah, they just did a survey when they were there last time, but,
I don't mean to interrupt you, sir.
no,
But they were gonna take it out, go
no.
back a little bit, and then you came in the next day and said you don't want anything done.
No, they were there just to do a survey, not to actually do the work. There was no equipment there or anything, just
Right,
surveying. Yeah.
exactly right. And they told you what they were going to do. They were gonna
Right.
put it on a
Well-
calendar to come back to do it.
We're gonna have Peter Hans said we would have one last meeting with the neighbors, the 4 neighbors concerning, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay. Do you have any idea when this meeting is gonna take place?
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Barnett is free to meet with anyone he likes. This board can close the hearing, and Mr. Barnett's still free to meet with anyone.
Can we give a date?
No, I wouldn't.
I will close the hearing.
Just close it.
Let's close it?
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna close it, and you can conduct your business with Mr. Hans, all right?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Could I have a motion to close the application, please?
So moved.
Second?
Motion's been made to close the application. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you. Okay.
By the way, your stenographer is phenomenal. She doesn't miss anything.
Okay,
Haven't had the Southwest chicken salad at farm to table. You gotta have it.
next case, Barbado.
Yes. Well, I'll read it into the record. The next case on the agenda, case number 18977, Lauren Barbado, 16 Hamlet Woods Drive, Smithtown. The location of the property, the northeast corner of Hamlet Woods Drive and Pond View. The property is zoned R21. The applicant is requesting variances to reduce the minimum side yard setback from 15 feet to 8 feet for a proposed 223-square-foot garage addition, to increase the maximum permitted paved surface in the front yard on Hamlet Woods Drive from 25% to 40% for a proposed driveway addition.
Lauren Barbado here. Ms. Barbado is not here. This is the second time, and we're going to close the hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Motion's been made to close the application. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. And that concludes our meeting for tonight.